There's a few questions that we've got to answer when we want to find someone new, right? The first thing is like, where are we going to find them? Or where are we going to look for them, right? The second thing is, what are we looking for? And then the third thing is probably kind of related to the what, which is like, what are we going to ask them? Or maybe it's a how. How do we make sure that they're a good fit, right? So where are we going to find these people? What are we actually specifically looking for, and what are we going to ask them? And how do we make sure they're a good fit? Probably the three key questions when deciding who to bring on your team. I just want to give you guys something tangible so that you have a little framework and a little model when you're making your next hire, right? So the first thing we looked at was, where do we actually find these people? I've put down here just network, but what I would do is, if I was doing this process, probably if I put a post out on Instagram, maybe I ask my network, or maybe there's like a business platform or something that I know my like dream person is hanging out on. Then we talked about what. So what specifically do we want them to have? And there's three main categories, right? There's some must-haves, which are like our non-negotiables. There are some must-not-haves, which is around like poor communication, or they must not just ignore messages and take 3 days to get back to me. And then there's some nice-to-have. So like in an ideal world, they would have this thing. Cool. So now we need to think about, well, how are we going to make sure that they're actually the right person for the job? So let's get specific on what this looks like. There's probably going to be a few elements to this. Like you said, there's going to be a conversation just to kind of get a general feel and ask them some more questions. There's probably going to be some kind of task that they have to do. And then there might be a trial, right? So there's the initial kind of get to know you. Hey, do you seem like a cool person? And a lot of the time you will just get a kind of vibe from someone straight away, where you maybe just know that they're not going to be a good fit culturally, or there's just something about them which means that you're not going to get on. So I'd keep that initial conversation short. And this is, guys, this is exactly the same for clients, right? So I want you to think about dating, not marrying. So when you're doing this with prospects, you want to date them, you want to get to know them, you want to have a conversation, then you want to have maybe a logical next step, which is a kind of task and a trial all in one. And then you can pitch your main thing, right? But it's the same for recruiting. So think about dating. You want to have that initial conversation. Do you get on? Then you want to create a task for them. But here's the thing that I think most people miss, is we don't create tasks that test this. We don't create tasks that test this. We create tasks that just focus on skills. Okay, so look at what you typed up here that isn't directly related to their skill set, and tell me, what could you actually give them in terms of a task that would test whether they are coachable, or they communicate well, or whatever the thing that you've put in there which isn't directly related to their skill set. How could you test if someone was coachable or not? What about asking, have they ever had a coach? What about asking, what are some of their favorite personal development books? What do they do? What books do they read in their spare time? So this seems like a weird thing to do, but you're all kind of on the money, is like deliberately do things that you know are missing and see if that person picks up on it or corrects you. So as an example, one of the things that I did for Carrie, and Carrie started working with us, is I was just terrible at getting back to her. I basically just ignored her a lot and saw how much she followed up with me. Because that's what we're looking for in a role. We're looking for somebody who's not afraid to follow up, who's not afraid to say, hey, I messaged you the other day, you didn't reply. So if we don't follow up with someone and then they don't follow up with us and they just go off the radar, they already failed that first test. So I want you to think about specific tests that are related to some of these softer skills, not just are they a good graphic designer, or can they sell, or can they coach, or whatever it is, right? Okay, task, and then a trial. So the reason I say trial is because in my experience, most people jump into this way too quickly. So we've been running our business for 7 years now, and we still don't have any full-time employees. I mean, we have technically full-time employees, but everybody is still on contracts, right? So nobody actually has an official, we employ you. Hoping to do that soon with Carrie, but there'll be probation periods, there'll be trial periods, there'll be things in the agreements. Because the thing is, like, everyone's in different countries, so the laws are all very different. But at least in the UK, once you employ someone full-time, it becomes very difficult just to stop employing them. You have to have a pretty strong reason to all of a sudden say, we don't want to work with you anymore, right? So you want to make sure that they're 100% good fit. It's like marrying someone, right? You don't just like go and marry someone after the first few dates. You date them for a bit, you see how committed they are, you get to learn about them, you know about them, you understand. So what is their trial period going to be? And so for you, Amanda, like you don't even have to bring on a full-time designer. You could just say, hey, I want a contractor, and see how they show up. Because we'll switch gears in a minute, but I just want to say this last thing. You will notice, for those of you that came to the intensive in January, you will notice how Will and Lindsay and Robin like showed up on that intensive. They were part of our team, right? But technically they're just contractors or freelancers or however you want to refer to that as. But our team show up as part of our team because that's the kind of culture and that's the things that we've embedded with that relationship. So just because somebody is freelancing or contracting doesn't mean that they all of a sudden should show up as a freelancer. You want someone who feels like they're bought into what you do. You want someone you can feel like you rely on, who's taking ownership for the work they do, who's taking ownership for the outcomes and the results that they're getting, right? So don't be afraid to like treat someone as part of your team, even if on paper they're technically just a contractor, because it will be a good test to see whether they're actually bought into what you do or whether they're just there because there's a paycheck at the end of it. So the last and final thing is like, what are the practical steps? So if we broke that down, everything that we've talked about, right? What are the practical steps to actually finding this person? What do we need to do right now? And when you're reviewing, just out of interest, how are you going to decide who you interview and who you don't? There's one thing here that we can do, which we can also do to potential prospects, right? Which is what a lot of us miss, is we can actually qualify. So we can actually get people, like when we have this job post, right, to kind of apply, they have to answer 5, 6, maybe 10 questions. And from that, we can just go through. Like when we were recruiting for Carrie's role, me and Will, there were like a bunch of Google submission forms that we just went through, haven't answered this question, haven't answered that question, were this on that, and just got an automatic, sorry, this isn't the role for you, right? So by having that kind of like application form, the same way you can have that for clients, it's like qualifying criteria. Is it worth my time jumping on a call with this person? So it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be just super short Google form, type form, something like that. And just make sure that you include that when you shortlist and you're reviewing, before you jump on that call with them. Just make sure that you're not jumping on a call with someone who, even though they might seem great on a lot of other things, if there's like 1 or 2 things that clearly in there violate your must not haves, whether they haven't bothered to answer a question or whether they've just given like a really vague answer and it's clear that they haven't been bothered to really fill it out, I just wouldn't even bother talking to those people, because the effort level has to be equal. So if you'd like to dig down into some of these strategies a little bit further, then click the link below and you can apply for my live workshop, where I will be showing you behind the scenes of what's working for other creative agencies and giving you a custom roadmap to grow your business.